Everyone, season 2 of This Week in Hockey East is here. Welcome to our show. Thanks for coming back with us. We're so excited that hockey's back. We're so excited that this show is back with a couple of new wrinkles this year. First of all, we're here on NESN. We're so excited to partner and continue our partnership with Hockey East on NESN and be able to bring you more and more information about the best league in college hockey. And we're also very excited that Bridgette Proulx is here to join us as the new co-host of This Week in Hockey East. Bridgette, excited to have you. Excited to talk about hockey this year.
I'm excited too. I'm just happy hockey's back, Eric, and I'm happy to work with you again. We've worked a little bit together in the past, and we're pretty much always talking about hockey anyway, so why not just have a show about it?
That's exactly right. Before we get into the games, we want to acknowledge this hockey season will be played with the huge loss of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, always in our thoughts this year. Two great college hockey players, two great people and BC alums who left us obviously far too soon. We'll be thinking about them and their families all season long. So one of the things that we're doing this year is leading into our Friday night Hockey East on NESN games that we'll spend a lot of time talking about with our show. So let's start right there. And our first Friday night Hockey East on NESN game is the Boston University Terriers going to Matthews Arena to take on Northeastern. Bridgette, you'll be there. Let's start with the Terriers, who had a couple of really close competitive games against the Gophers last weekend. What stands out to you about BU? So far, they had a really compact first week. They played 3 games in their first week of the season. They already have a Hockey East game under their belt as well, that with a 7-1 win against Merrimack, all ready to build off of. But playing against the number 2 team in the country in the first week of the season is never easy. 2 losses there. But I think that early on, I've already been impressed with what the new captain, Tamara Giaquinto, has done. She's a grad student this year, a defenseman. She's got 2 power play goals on the season, which is more than anyone in Hockey East as of right now. And she seems to be really taking control of the blue line back there. So be interested to see how she leads the defense in her first year as a captain. And also, Lindsay Bachna, who transferred from Providence College, has already made an impact in the first week of games with a goal. So she's another player to watch. And one freshman I'd like to spotlight as well, Lola Reed, Rookie of the Week. She had a goal and 2 assists against Merrimack in the season opener. So just a newcomer to keep an eye on in this matchup against Northeastern. And also, I think goaltending is going to be a big topic of conversation with this matchup. And sophomore Mari Peterson was in net for 2 of the 3 games for BU already, but Callie Shanahan, also another good goalie for that team. I'm curious to see how much they rotate them last year. They had a 3 goalie platoon, some of that due to injury and necessity, but they still have Shanahan and Peterson this season to work with. Yeah, and let's talk about this Northeastern team who started 2-2, a couple of solid weekend splits against some non-conference ranked teams in Penn State and Quinnipiac last weekend. A little bit less turnover for Northeastern than some of the other teams in Hockey East. 5 freshmen, 7 newcomers in total, which is actually on the smaller side of newcomers in sort of the new age of college hockey. One of the things that I find so interesting about this Northeastern team, that staff has always been so good at recruiting internationally and bringing in players from wherever they can find them. All 5 freshmen this year are international students, 3 from Canada and 2 from Sweden. So once again, that staff is finding great players. Let's talk about the Huskies' start to the season, and we have to start with Skylar Irving, Hockey's 3rd-team All-Star last year. She's our Jersey Mike sub above Women's Player of the Week. Big weekend last weekend, especially on Friday, where she had 4 points, a goal, and 3 assists in the Game 1 weekend winner over Quinnipiac. She scored in each of the first 3 games of the season for Northeastern. That's huge to get the Huskies offense going. At times last year, they were really winning on goaltending, so big to get the offense going for them. Point 2, let's talk about Paige Taborski in goal for Northeastern. .936 save percentage over the first 4 games of the season. No more than 2 goals allowed in her first 4. Remember, Northeastern has been goalie U here the last couple of years. Just look at some of these numbers. It's hard to believe, right? Gwyneth Phillips, first in the country last year, .955 save percentage. First the year before, .960. Before that, Aaron Frankel, 956 save percentage in 2022. That was second in the country. 965, 958, first in the country. I mean, they've just been dominant in goal, and they've been able to win games like that for a long time now. So can Toporski be that person, right?
By the way, both of those goalies went on to get drafted in the PWHL, and they're going to be both playing professionally this season. And Ken Taborski now follow up those two amazing goalies for Northeastern. But it seems like time and time again, they're built around this really strong defensive structure and on the back of a good goaltender.
Yeah, they definitely have, and it'll be interesting to see how that progresses through. The one thing that did stand out last weekend, a power play goal by Quinnipiac in each of those two games. Remember, Northeastern only allowed 9 power play goals all year last year, so that is certainly something to watch for this Huskies team, but should be a good matchup Friday and then also Saturday at Agganis Arena.
Yeah, I'm excited for this call. This will be our first call on NESN for anything. This will be my first call of the season on NESN, and I think we got a great crew and a rematch of the Beanpot championship game, which dramatically went to overtime and ended on an overtime game winner by Skylar Irving, who, like you mentioned, is our Sub-Above Women's Player of the Week. So interested to see if there's maybe a little extra chip on the Terrier's shoulder to try to avenge that loss in the Beanpot.
It always is when there's a couple of Beanpot rivals going at it. That should be fun, but that is just the start of what's coming up in Hockey East this week. When we come back, we're going to look at the men's side. There's a couple of massive non-conference games early in the season, including 2 versus 4 in East Lansing. We'll talk about that and plenty more on our debut episode of This Week in Hockey East on NESN.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Bridgette Proulx with Eric Gallanty. It's time to take you around Hockey East, presented by the Boston Harbor Hotel. Visit hockeyeastonline.com for your chance to win championship tickets and a 2-night stay at the Boston Harbor Hotel. As promised, Eric, it's time to go around some of those really high-profile, top-ranked games in our men's slate, starting with BC at Michigan State on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, it's so awesome that a lot of these really, really top teams have scheduled each other early in the season. It's a benefit pairwise purposes. It's a benefit for us as fair. Yeah, exactly. We're going to talk about that coming up with UMass and a little pairwise note. Never too early to get a little pairwise segment in. But let's talk about 2 versus 4, right? Boston College at Michigan State. Remember, the Spartans were in. They were swept by BC at Conti Forum last year. That was a little later in October because, remember, it came right after the Eagles dropped that game to Denver. So it was a little bit of a bounce back last year, and it let BC sort of hit the ground running from there. Look, you don't just replace the 2 guys that Boston College lost to the NHL, right? Cutter Gauthier and Will Smith, who were the national leaders in goals and points last season. Key pieces as well in terms of veterans, like guys like Jack Malone and Jacob Bankson certainly stands out. But that all being said, there is a lot coming back, as we know. And Ryan Leonard has spoken really honestly and openly about just the hollow feeling that group felt after losing the national championship game to Denver and wanting to come back and sort of try to accomplish their unfinished business, right? From last year, Leonard pointed to that was a big reason why he decided to come back this year. Gabe Perreault's back, Jacob Fowler's back, Gasso and Yelvik, who played with Cutter Gauthier last year. And then really, they're really deep in the back as well, with Eamon Powell coming back as a 5th year. Remember, Jacob Fowler set the wins record for freshmen last year. He's back into the fold. And then you have the great recruiting class, right, of James Hagan's coming in, who right now is the consensus #1 pick in the upcoming NHL draft. You have Dean Letourneau, Boston Bruins first-round pick from this most recent year. But it is interesting because one of the reasons that BC was so good so fast last year was because those lines were so good playing together. The freshmen had played a year together. Even that Gasso, Gauthier, and Yelvik line had played together. That's not the case this year at the beginning of the season. You have new centers coming in. BC lost 77% of their faceoffs from last year, most of that Smith and Gauthier. So I don't think there's any doubt about how good they can be, but how quickly does that come together will certainly be interesting. And on a final note, remember, Michigan State has Trey Augustine in goal. He's been the national team goalie with all these guys coming up. So Leonard and Perreault have been shooting on Trey Augustine since they were about, 16 years old. So there's a lot of familiarity, really exciting matchup coming up this weekend.
And another matchup we want to spotlight is Providence College taking on number 6 North Dakota. Just one game this weekend that it'll be the Friars' longest road trip of the year to start right off the bat. And to set the stage, really PC first game of the season. Last year, they missed the NCAA tournament by just maybe they were the first team out. They just barely missed it because they had a tough end to the season. They started losing regular season games and granted against tough opponents that were ranked like BU. But that caused them to miss the NCAA tournament. And now they're playing a team that finished first in the NCHC last year, a team that's picked number 6 right now in the nation. So it's going to be a really tough matchup to start with. And PC actually bringing back one of the more experienced teams, 13 upperclassmen. Captain Chase Yoder returns. Philip Svedback going into his junior season. He's had a first 2 good seasons with the Friars, and they've added 6 new freshmen and 5 grad transfers, which really the grad transfers really bring that extra experience from outside. And to speak about the freshman Trevor Connolly, a first round draft pick that the Friars have added, Zach Borgil coming in as a grad transfer from Merrimack as what seems like the backup to Philip Svedback, or maybe they platoon them this season. We don't know yet. They haven't even started their season, but some big losses for the Friars include Riley Duran, who is now in the Bruins organization, played some preseason games with them very recently. Brady Berard transferred out to Boston College after 2 seasons with the Friars, and Ben Shimmick transferred to Arizona State. So those are some of the key differences in how the roster is built this season. So I'm excited to see this first matchup between a PC team that's actually really supposed to improve this year and was picked, and we'll get to this later, picked pretty high in the coaches poll to start the season.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in goal, right? Nate Lehman's been very honest. 920 save percentage. That's what we need. Whether it's Fedback, whether it's Borgil, whether it's both, that's what we need. So it'll be interesting to see. One final big one to talk about this weekend. UMass is going out to the Icebreaker in Vegas. They'll start with Nebraska, Omaha, and then game 2 potentially against Minnesota or Air Force. Nice offensive start for UMass. They scored 5 at Bentley in their first game of the season. Idar Sunyev, who was our night shift all-academic standout from last year. Sunyev, who scored a hat trick in that game. UMass led 5-1. Bentley did come back and eventually got that game to 5-4, but still a victory. UMass ended up losing an exhibition in overtime in game 2, kind of a funky couple of bounces in that overtime. But UMass, I'm really interested to see. They're a little young in the back, but they do have Michael Hrabel back as well, a sophomore goaltender. As Greg Carville told us this week, he was maybe a little inconsistent at times last year, but boy, he's a difference maker when he's on. And then I mentioned that pairwise note quickly. It's still way early to think about this, but think about the difference between if you get Minnesota potentially on your schedule for strength of schedule purposes. So if you could get through Nebraska, Omaha, likely play Minnesota, that could have a huge difference when it comes to those bubble teams late in the season. So that is something to watch this weekend out in Vegas.
All right, well, those are some of the key men's games. When we come back, we'll continue to take a look around Hockey East and some of the women's games on the schedule.
Welcome back. Let's keep going around Hockey East. Another game that we're going to have on Nesson this weekend, Saturday. It's UNH and Yukon, the defending champs. The Huskies have looked relatively good so far. Bridgette, what stands out to you?
So yeah, this game is me and Gigi Marvin, who I'm really excited to work with. She just announced her retirement from the PWHL, and I can already tell, going to be a great broadcast partner. So we actually just spoke to both coaches. One thing that we talked to Coach McKenzie about was some of his returners who he expects to have big seasons, and one was Ava Rinker. She's the leader on the defense this year, and she's supposed to get a lot of minutes. She already got a lot of minutes in their 2 matchups with top 15 ranked teams when they played number 2 Minnesota and number 12 Penn State. So she's going to take up a lot of minutes. And then Ashley Allard coming back as a sophomore. He expects her to have a big second season because she's somebody that works really hard. He told me that she beats all the metrics in strength and conditioning that they have internally. And so she's another player to watch there. And last year, this was a team that allowed the fewest goals against. And a lot of that had to do with goaltending. And they returned both goaltenders, Tia Chan and Megan Warner. And then UNH finished in the middle of the pack last season. And this is going to be their first big test of the season. They played Assumption for 2 games already, but this matchup with the reigning Hockey East champions is going to be a good way to start the season in conference play for them.
Yeah, UNH really kind of kicked above its weight last year. They had a really strong year under Hillary Witt. It's going to be interesting to see if they can follow that up. Obviously, tough ask against Yukon. We look forward to watching you guys on Saturday. One other thing in the women's slate that stands out this week, Holy Cross has two with Boston College Thursday, Saturday, but specifically that Saturday game at BC. Remember, this Holy Cross team has had a knack for knocking off some big opponents. We've seen them play Northeastern well. We saw them go to Boston College and win a game in a shootout last year. So something to watch for a Holy Cross team that is 3-1 to start the season. Couple of wins over St. A's, and they split with RPI. Alexia Morrow, really good so far. A goal, assist, 12 shots. She won 26 of 35 faceoffs last weekend against St. A's. Holy Cross scoring a little bit, maybe more than they did last year. So those are some positive signs, I think, for this Holy Cross team. We'll see what they do with Boston College and a full women's slate coming up this week in Hockey East. We've talked a lot about returners. There's some really key new pieces that are coming into the fold this year in Hockey East. Let's talk about a couple of them. I mentioned James Hagens a little bit earlier, but I want to dive in a little bit more on him because I would say it's not often you have the consensus number one pick in the following NHL draft playing in your league, except that it was also the case last year, right, with Macklin Celebrini. You talk about the shoes that Hagens has to fill, because not only do you have the factor of replacing Gauthier and Smith at Boston College, but you also have the factor of being in basically the same position that Celebrini was in. And as much as we think the talent's there, we've seen it. He set the record for most points in the World Championships in the summer. So he certainly has the talent to do it. But how does he come in as a 17-year-old, at least for the next month, probably centering with two of the top wings in the country, and Leonard and Proulx? We'll see what it looks like. Greg Brown still mixing and matching a little bit. But it's going to be a really exciting player to watch. Coming in with his brother to Boston College. Michael will be on the back end as a freshman for BC this year. He's going to be the first guy on any list of newcomers to watch in Hockey East this year.
Yep, him and Cole Eiserman, who I want to detail right now. Cole Eiserman coming in, maybe going to be a new fan favorite after Macklin Celebrini leaves BU, another freshman to really to watch and to get excited about, because Eiserman, though he fell a little bit in the draft to 20th to the New York Islanders, I think that maybe his offensive ability is still potentially going to be the best on the team coming in as a freshman. He could replace Macklin Celebrini's numbers in terms of goals scored based on what he's done in the past with the U.S. national development team. He had 58 goals in 57 games, 127 career goals with the national development program, which is a record. And that's always a team that is full of good players, and he was leading them. So another offensive talent to get behind if you're a BU fan this season.
Yeah, and had a goal in that opening game against Holy Cross. The Cole show was certainly on display for the Terriers. We're going to wrap things up. When we come back, we're going to take some short shifts and get you set for Friday Night Hockey East on Nesson. That's coming up this week in Hockey East. All right, welcome back to the final segment of our show, which, if you were with us last year, you're familiar. It's time to take some short shifts presented by the Shift Group, helping former athletes and veterans become elite sales professionals. It's a chance for us, something that we didn't get a chance to talk about over the course of the show, that we can quickly work in, a quick thought that we have. Bridgette, why don't you start? What's on your mind this week?
Yeah, my short shift has to do with something that's important to talk about before the season even starts. And it's a rule change to, or a protocol change to the Hockey East women's tournament. And they decided to go from the format of having the highest remaining seed host the championship game to having a set location. And this year it will be at Toscana Family Ice Forum, brand new facility at Yukon. It was their first full season there last year. And it's the location that hosted last season because the Yukon Huskies were that top seed. And when I talked to Coach Chris McKenzie today about just what that atmosphere was like there, he said that it was one of the best atmospheres he's ever played in. And we know that fans show up to Yukon, whether or not, not sport doesn't matter. And it's a really nice new rink to set this out for the first season going back to this format.
Yeah, it should be really exciting. It's great that people can plan for it, right? So get your tickets, and just be ready for what should be a great weekend. So that's awesome. One thing that we wanted to point out before we go and make sure you're aware of, there are a couple of key rule changes in college hockey this year. Many of you may know this, but just in case you haven't been following along, the big thing is we're getting even closer to squaring up with the NHL game, which I think is important, and the number of draft picks that we've seen come to college hockey. So any little thing we can do, and I think most coaches that we've talked to agree with this. The two biggest ones, the two most noticeable ones, number one is the face-off rule. So remember the last couple of years, rather than the center being tossed from the draw for a violation, there would just be a warning, and then a second warning would be a penalty. They've gotten rid of that. They've gone back to the NHL rule where a center can be tossed and you'd have to bring someone else in to take the face-off. Coaches like this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, while it does, present some strategy and having to have maybe multiple face-off guys on a line at the end of the game, coaches just felt like really good face-off guys were able to cheat it a little bit and know that they had that warning in their back pocket so they could try to jump a little bit. And it this way is a little bit more equitable across the board. So that's number one. The second one is eliminating the double jeopardy. So remember in college, it was different. If you scored a goal on a delayed penalty, you still got your power play to follow it. They've eliminated that this year. So it'll go to the NHL rule. A goal on a delayed penalty eliminates the power play. Again, it matches up with the NHL rule. Coaches I talked to like this as well. They didn't like the fact that one penalty could potentially completely swing a game by 2 goals. So we're matching up with the NHL, which I think is certainly a positive thing to see. So a couple of things to watch for this weekend. It should be a lot of great games. Thanks so much for joining us. And remember, if there's stuff you want us to talk about, this show is to present as much information about Hockey East for you, the fans. Reach out to us on X, reach out to Hockey East on X, reach out however else you want to do it. We can't wait to talk about it this year, and we can't wait to get to our first Friday night Hockey East on Nesson game, BU and Northeastern. That's coming up 7:00 on Nesson, so stay for that. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. Thanks for being here for our first episode of This Week in Hockey East.